All right, you sick fucks. Welcome back to another deep dive.
Back for more punishment, are we?
No,
Excellent.
today
Today's gonna be a good one.
we're going to talk about a breed of cattle that's as famous for ending up on your plate as it is for its completely fucked up genetics.
Oh, yeah.
The Aberdeen Angus.
The mighty Angus.
You think you know Angus beef, right?
That fancy pants steak you get?
Yeah, that ranky-ass steak
Get some.
at some overpriced steakhouse.
Yeah.
Well, get ready to have your minds blown because we're about to dive into the messed up world of these Scottish beefcakes.
These cows are more than just a meal.
Oh, yeah, and we got a shit ton of research to get through.
Listeners submitted as always.
Oh, yeah. Articles, studies, even some drunken forum rants.
The internet is a wonderful place.
You guys are a wild bunch, but don't worry, we're going to cut through the crap.
Give you the good stuff.
The juicy bits that'll leave you saying,
Holy shit.
I never knew that about Angus cows.
We'll be exploring their origins in the rugged Scottish Highlands, their rise to global beef stardom, and of course, we'll delve into those genetic quirks that make these cows both fascinating and, well,
Slightly terrifying.
yeah.
So let's rewind the clock and talk about where these bad boys came from.
Back to the very beginning.
These fuckers hail from Scotland, right?
Land of bagpipes, kilts, and apparently some seriously hardcore cattle.
Hardcore cattle.
These cows have been roaming the Scottish Highlands since at least the 16th century,
Oh, wow.
toughening up against those harsh winters and developing a reputation for, well, being
didn't know.
absolute units.
Absolute units.
Back then, they had some truly hilarious names like Angus Dotties and Bookin Humleys.
Wait a minute, what?
Imagine a bunch of drunk farmers sitting around coming up with those gems.
Angus Scotties
Dotties.
and Buchan Humleys.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It sounds like a couple of rejects from a Dr. Seuss book.
The names might be laughable, but they actually point to a key characteristic of the breed they're naturally pulled, meaning they don't have horns. Those farmers weren't keen on getting gored by a pissed-off bull.
Makes sense to me.
So they bred those horns right out of existence.
Smart move.
Yeah.
But seriously, these cows have been around for fucking centuries. How do they go from being Scottish hillbilly cows to the rock stars of the beef world?
Well, one name stands out in Angus history.
Lay it on me.
William McCombie.
William McCombie.
This guy was like the OG Angus breeder,
Okay.
the ultimate cow whisperer.
The cow whisperer.
Back in the 19th century, he started selectively breeding these cows for specific traits, marbling meat quality, that sort of thing. He
Okay.
basically wrote the Angus playbook.
And it paid off big time, right? Because these Angus bastards are everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Global domination.
Yeah.
Argentina in 1879, Australia in the 1820s, Canada in 1876, and even those burger-loving Americans got in on the action in 1873.
So we're talking world domination.
We are indeed.
These countries recognized the potential of Angus beef early on. The marbling, the flavor, the tenderness.
They saw the dollar signs.
Yeah, it was a game changer.
Yep.
Speaking of America, didn't those cowboys fuck things up a bit with their whole Angus association?
Oh, you mean the Great Angus Color Divide of 1917?
Fill me in.
Yeah, that was a real shit show. So the American Angus Association starts up in 1883, all-inclusive, welcoming both black and red Angus cattle.
Right.
But then for some reason, they decided black was the only way to go and kicked the red Angus out.
Hold on a minute. They just decided to discriminate against ginger cows. What a bunch of asshats.
Pretty much, they wanted a uniform, all-black breed. Of course, the red Angus breeders weren't having any of that bullshit.
Oh, hell no.
They were like, screw you guys, we're starting our own club, and boom.
Drama.
The Red Angus Association of America was born in 1954.
Ugh.
Talk about a catastrophe.
All right, let's move on from the drama and talk cow specs. We know these Angus beasts are known for being pulled, no horns, less chance of getting skewered. But what else makes them stand out?
Well, for starters, they're built like tanks.
Built like tanks.
They evolved to survive those brutal Scottish winters, so they're tough, resilient, and have this thick coat that makes them look like furry little tanks.
Right, but they're not those massive lumbering cows, right?
Actually, they're considered medium-sized. And here's a fun fact. Their calves are surprisingly small at birth, like way too small to make a decent veal cutlet.
So it's like nature's way of saying, hey, these cows are meant for big, juicy steaks, not those tiny little veal things.
Exactly. And speaking of big, juicy steaks, let's talk about what makes Angus beef so damn delicious.
And marbling.
The marbling.
Those beautiful streaks of fat that make the meat melt in your mouth,
It's like nature's butter.
making every bite a goddamn symphony of flavor.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
But we'll get into the meaty details later. First, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the mutant calf in the barn.
Oh, here we go.
Those genetic disorders.
The dark side of Angus genetics, these cows might be superstars in the beef world, but they also carry a hidden burden, a predisposition to some pretty fucked up genetic disorders.
Okay, spill the tea. What kind of genetic freak shows are we talking about here?
Well, there are four main recessive genetic disorders that can plague Angus calves.
Hit me.
Arthrogryposis multiplex,
Okay.
neuropathic hydrocephalus,
Keep going.
contractural arachnodactyly, free and dwarfism.
Okay, so back up a sec. Those are some seriously scientific-sounding names. Break it down for us simple folk.
Fair enough. Arthrogryposis multiplex, or AM for short, basically messes with their joints, making it hard for them to move. Imagine being born with all your limbs contorted. Not a fun way to start life.
Damn, that's rough. What about the other ones?
Neuropathic hydrocephalus, or NH, is basically a messed up skull. These calves are born with fluid buildup in their brains, which can lead to all sorts of neurological problems. Contractural arachnodactyly, or CA, is a bit more subtle. It affects their hips and legs, making it hard for them to walk properly. And then there's dwarfism, which, well, you know what dwarfism is.
Yeah, short cow's not exactly ideal for the beef industry.
Exactly. These genetic disorders are a major concern for breeders because they can impact the calves' health, welfare, and ultimately their value as beef cattle.
So what the hell are they doing about it? Are they just letting these poor calves suffer?
No, of course not. The American Angus Association is taking this shit seriously. They're using DNA testing and selective breeding to try to weed out these genetic issues. They've even developed this fancy tool called Angus GS Genomic Selection, which is like a genetic matchmaking service for cows.
So they're playing Cupid with cow DNA. That's some next level shit.
It's all about identifying the good genes and the bad genes and making sure the good ones get passed down.
Right.
It's complicated stuff, but the goal is to create healthier, more resilient Angus cattle and hopefully eliminate those heartbreaking genetic disorders.
All right, so we've covered the origin story, the rise to beef stardom, and the genetic roller coaster that is Angus breeding.
It's a hell of a ride.
But don't touch that dial, folks, because we're just getting warmed up.
In part one, we talked about where these magnificent beasts came from, their history, their genetics.
All that good shit.
And now we're going to delve into...
the meat of the matter.
Indeed.
Angus beef is everywhere these days. You see it plastered on menus, slapped on supermarket packaging template. Hell, even my local gas station is trying to sell me Angus beef jerky.
It's ubiquitous.
It is. So what's the deal with all this Angus hype? Is it all just marketing bullshit, or is there something special about this stuff?
It's a bit of both, to be honest.
Okay.
The Angus breed does have a natural predisposition for marbling, which, as we discussed earlier, is a major factor in beef quality. But the term Angus has definitely been hijacked by marketing departments eager to cash in on the breed's reputation.
But basically, they're just slapping the Angus name on anything to make a quick buck.
Essentially.
All right,
yeah.
so let's break it down for the folks at home who might not be fluent in beef speak. What the fuck do all these labels mean? You've got your select your choice, your prime, and then there's that fancy pants certified Angus beef with the black and gold label. It's enough to make your head spin.
You're right. It can be a bit confusing.
A little bit.
Those USDA grades, select, choice, and prime, mainly reflect the amount of marbling in the beef.
So more marbling equals better beef.
Generally speaking, yes. More marbling generally means a juicier, more flavorful steak.
Gotcha.
Angus cattle, thanks to their genetics, tend to produce beef that falls into those higher grades.
Okay.
But here's the catch. Any breed of cattle can technically achieve those grades.
What?
It's not exclusive to Angus.
So slapping an Angus label on a piece of meat doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to be a goddamn culinary masterpiece.
Exactly. It's a marketing tactic, pure and simple.
Damn, those sneaky bastards.
Now, the certified Angus beef label is a different story.
Okay.
They have stricter standards than the USDA, looking at things like marbling maturity and even the color of the ribeye.
So it's like Angus beef that went to an Ivy League school.
Something like that.
All right, fancy labels aside, let's get real for a second.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these cows live pretty miserable lives before they end up on our plates. Right? We're talking cramped feedlots, mountains of manure, and enough antibiotics to make a pharmacist blush.
Sadly, you're not wrong.
Okay.
The industrialization of the beef industry has created some pretty grim conditions for many cattle.
Right.
We're talking about packing animals into confined spaces, feeding them grain-heavy diets that mess with their digestion, and pumping them full of drugs to keep them from getting sick in those unsanitary environments.
So much for the image of happy cows grazing in open pastures.
Yeah, that's mostly a fantasy these days.
And then there's the whole slaughterhouse thing. Not exactly a fun topic for dinner conversation.
It's a necessary evil, I suppose, but the conditions in some slaughterhouses are truly appalling.
Right.
There have been countless reports of animal cruelty, mishandling, and unsanitary practices.
Jesus.
It's enough to make even the most hardened carnivore question their choices.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears for a second before we all become fucking vegetarians. What about Angus burgers? Surely those are a safe bet, right? I mean, who doesn't love a good juicy Angus burger?
Ah, the Angus burger.
Another culinary masterpiece.
Another marketing minefield, I'm afraid.
Oh, come on.
You'll see Angus burgers everywhere, but the actual percentage of Angus beef in those patties can vary wildly.
Get the fuck out of here.
Some might be 100% Angus, while others might contain only a small percentage blended with other cheaper cuts of beef.
So I could be paying a premium for an Angus burger that's mostly just bullshit.
It's a classic bait and switch.
So how the hell are we supposed to know what we're actually eating? It's like the Wild West of beef out there.
The best way to ensure you're getting what you pay for is to do your research.
Research for a burger?
Look for reputable butchers, farmers markets, or local farms that specialize in Angus beef.
You know.
Ask questions, read labels carefully, and be willing to pay a bit more for quality and transparency.
So it's all about knowing your farmer, knowing your beef. It shouldn't be this complicated to buy a fucking burger.
You'd think it would be simpler, wouldn't you? But that's the state of the industry. I'm afraid it's up to us as consumers to demand better and to support producers who are doing things the right way.
So we got to vote with our wallets. Welcome back, you beautiful bastards. Ready for the final round of our Angus ass-kicking.
Let's finish this deep dive, shall we?
All right, so last time we left off talking about the not-so-pretty side of the beef industry.
The industrialization, the feedlots.
Yeah, all that shit. But let's get back to those genetic freaks we talked about earlier. Are scientists doing anything to fix that shit, or are we going to be stuck with mutant calves forever?
There's definitely progress being made. The American Angus Association is using DNA testing and selective breeding to try and eliminate those harmful recessive genes, and they're getting pretty damn good at it. Okay,
so remind me about that whole genomic selection thing you mentioned. Is that actually working, or is it just a bunch of hype?
It's the real deal. Genomic selection, or Angus GS as they call it, is revolutionizing the breeding process by analyzing an animal's DNA. They can predict its genetic potential, including its susceptibility to those nasty disorders. It's like having a crystal ball that tells you which cows are going to produce healthy, robust calves.
So they're basically playing God with cow DNA.
In a way, yes, they're identifying the good genes and the bad genes and making sure the good ones get passed down.
Pretty mind-blowing shit.
It is, and it's not just about eliminating diseases. They're also using this technology to enhance desirable traits like marbling, growth rate, and even temperament.
Temperament.
You don't want a pissed-off bull with a bad attitude.
Makes sense. So they're basically creating super cows.
In essence, yes.
Sounds like something out of a comic book, but hey, if it means better steaks and fewer mutant calves, I'm all for it.
It's all about improving the breed.
Okay, so we've got super cows, but what about the whole sustainability thing? Are we going to be stuck with these massive industrial feedlots forever? Or is there a more ethical way to raise cattle?
The demand for sustainable and ethically sourced food is growing, and the beef industry is starting to take notice.
So they're feeling the pressure.
They are. One promising trend is the rise of grass-fed or pasture-raised Angus beef.
Yeah, I've heard of that grass-fed beef. Isn't that supposed to be better for the cows and the environment?
It certainly has its advantages. Grass-fed cattle spend their lives grazing on pastures, which is a more natural and humane way of raising them. It's also good for the environment because it promotes biodiversity, reduces reliance on pesticides, and helps sequester carbon in the soil.
So it's a win-win.
In theory, yes, but there are challenges as well.
Like what?
While grass-fed beef takes longer to produce and it can be more expensive, plus not all land is suitable for grazing, and managing a pasture-based system can be challenging.
So it's a trade-off between cost efficiency and ethics. Sounds like a tough nut to crack.
It is, but there are also some innovative approaches emerging, like regenerative grazing, which focuses on restoring soil health and improving carbon sequestration.
Regenerative grazing.
It's all about finding a balance between producing high-quality beef and protecting the environment.
Okay, so we've got super cows and happy cows.
Yeah.
What else is on the horizon for the Angus industry? Are we going to be eating lab-grown steaks anytime soon?
Lab-grown meat, or cultured meat as it's sometimes called, is definitely a hot topic. It's still in the early stages of development. But the idea is to grow meat from animal cells in a lab, eliminating the need to raise and slaughter animals.
So we're talking about those weird pink blob-like things I've seen online.
The technology is advancing rapidly. The goal is to create meat that looks, tastes, and feels like the real deal, but without the ethical baggage and environmental impact.
Okay, but will people actually eat it?
It's a big question. There's the ick factor to consider, but if it tastes good and is affordable, it could be a game changer.
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Indeed, the future of Angus beef and the beef industry as a whole will be shaped by consumer demand and technological advancements.
All right, folks, that's a wrap on our Angus adventure. We've gone from those rugged Scottish Highlands to the cutting-edge labs where they're growing meat in petri dishes.
It's been quite a journey.
We've talked about everything from their fucked-up genetics to the future of beef production.
And everything in between.
So next time you're biting into a juicy Angus burger, remember all the shit that went into making that happen? The history, the science, the ethical dilemmas. It's more than just a meal. It's a whole damn story.
A story that's still being written.
Damn right. And that's all the time we've got for today's deep dive. We'll catch you beautiful bastards next time.
Until then, stay curious.
Wait,